Because right now we getting ready to bury another young black man. So Chief Hahn, explain to me, where's the change at? We thought if we got you in, by you being a black man, and I'm not being prejudiced, but it is what it is, that we would get a little bit of type of change. But you ain't did nothing, because we still had killings under your belt. And you should have been here today to support us and let us know that this is not going to continue to happen. And see, and this is how we know it's going to continue to happen, because they're not out here. They don't give a damn. They're not out here.
It's a phone, not a gun. It's a phone, not a gun. It's a phone, not a gun. It's a phone, not a gun.
Hello family, this is African Esquire and welcome to the Federation of African Liberation. We are a Pan-Africanist organization that seeks to unite the whole of the diaspora for the purpose of mutual unity, and not just unity, but liberation of all of our people throughout the world. So if you are someone who's interested in Pan-Africanism, or if you are someone who is interested in Black liberation, you should check out our page and learn more about us and what we do. So I'm going to talk about a story that came out this past week, and it was about the basically the whole the Russian stole the election. We keep hearing that. But the story specifically was talking about this idea. I think an idea, but really it is a story that came out that said that Russians basically were the motivating factor behind the black vote not going to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. And the story came from news reports that Russia was specifically targeting African Americans more than any other single group when it came to actually spreading information on the internet, on Facebook, and they were trying to basically motivate African Americans not to vote, make us feel like Hillary Clinton was not going to represent us, and if not make us favorable towards Donald Trump, then certainly make us disfavorable to engaging in the political process in 2016. Now, I'm going to read from an article from the New York Times. The title of the article is Russian 2016 Influence Operation Targeted African Americans on Social Media. It's published by Scott Shane and Shara Frankel, and it was on December 17, 2018. I'm just reading an excerpt from the article, not the whole thing. You can check out the whole thing on your own. The Russian campaign was the subject of Senate hearings last year and has been widely scrutinized by academic experts. The news reports largely confirm earlier findings that the campaign was designed to attack Ms. Clinton, boost Mr. Trump, and exacerbate existing divisions in American society. But New Knowledge report gives particular attention to the Russians' focus on African Americans, which is evident to anyone who examines collections of their memes and messages. The most prolific IRA efforts on Facebook and Instagram specifically targeted Black American communities and appear to have been focused on developing Black audiences and recruiting Black Americans as assets, the report says. Using Gmail accounts with American-sounding names, the Russians recruited and sometimes paid unwitting American activists of all races to stage rallies and spread content. But there was a disproportionate pursuit of African Americans, it concludes. The report says that while other distinct ethnic and religious groups were the focus of one or two Facebook pages or Instagram accounts, the Black community was targeted extensively with dozens. In some cases, Facebook ads were targeted at users who had shown interest in particular topics, including Black history, the Black Panther Party, and Malcolm X. So the most popular of the Russian Instagram accounts was Blackstagram, which had 300,000 and 303,663 followers. The Internet Research Agency also created a dozen websites disguised as African American in origin, with names like BlackMattersUs.com, Blacktivist, which I did follow personally, I will say, BlackToLive.org, and BlackSoul.us. On YouTube, the largest share of Russian material covered the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality, with channels called Don't Shoot and Black to Live. Something else very interesting. The NAACP apparently felt like they had to chime in from this report. I guess I'll talk about them. I'll talk about them now. So it says, in response, the NAACP said it would not use Facebook or Instagram for a week and urges social media followers and partners to do the same. And I actually looked up the statement from the NAACP that they released on this issue, and they said basically that Facebook's engagement with partisan firms is targeting of political opponents, the spread of misinformation, and the utilization of Facebook for propaganda, promoting disingenuous portrayals of the African American community is reprehensible, Derek Johnson said of the NAACP. They have returned a donation recently that they received from Facebook and will lead a hashtag log out of Facebook and Instagram campaign for 1 week starting December 18th. So it started recently. The report goes on to say that the right-wing pages promoted Donald Trump's candidacy. The left-wing pages scorned Ms. Clinton while promoting Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. The voter suppression effort was focused particularly on Sanders supporters and African Americans, engaged in urging them to shun Ms. Clinton in the general election and either vote for Ms. Stein or stay home. So this report said a lot, and I just wanted to get all that information out because I think it's very important to dissect. So what they're essentially saying is that there was a lot going on, of course, in the 2016 election, but a lot of the stirring was done by the Russians, and they were essentially trying to get sentiment in America to basically ensure that Miss Clinton, Hillary Clinton, did not win the election. Now, here's why I don't care about this. Okay, number one, I don't think that outside the Russians, I'm not going to say whether or not they affected the election in any way. I personally believe that they probably didn't. All of the problems with Hillary Clinton's candidacy were so deep that it did not take someone from the outside to actually instigate them. The problems were with the Clintons. The problem was with the corruption of the Clintons that was exhibited for many, many years. The problem was with the Clintons whenever they instituted a crime bill in the 90s that led to the worst stint of mass incarceration of Africans in America to have ever happened in history. That was what the problem was. The problem was that they had this person who was pretending to be this super liberal. But if you look at their history, you know, this same person who everyone talks about, oh, she's the first woman, she's going to fight for women's rights. A lot of people don't remember the fact that Hillary Clinton actually worked to cover up the sexual allegations against sexual abuse allegations against Bill Clinton. So this person who you're basically making it seem like she's this pro-woman advocate, she apparently had something to do with covering up allegations that women were trying to make against Bill Clinton. This is the person who she goes to bed with, someone who is alleged to have sexually assaulted other women. So how is it that you really are convinced that this person cares so much about your issues? And the thing that we have to understand about the Clintons is that they showed very much that they didn't really have moral guidance, meaning they're willing to flip on an issue if it is politically convenient in the time. So, of course, they were very tough on crime in the 90s because at that point, that was the atmosphere in America. But when Black Lives Matter became a major component of the American scheme as far as the moral grounds of where people was feeling was an injustice in society, you seen them flip their entire stance. You always see them flip their stance whenever it is politically beneficial to them. So that was the problem with why they lost the election as far as the black vote. I also think that as far as the black vote, we had been basically so discouraged from, we had a black president and a lot of people felt like that was going to be a saving grace of the black community. Of course, that did nothing for the black community. So it's very hard after having someone that actually looks like you in office, someone who supposedly is from, although he wasn't from a typical African American background, but someone who is from Chicago, at least in his adult years, and his wife was born and raised in Chicago. The idea that actually wasn't enough And so therefore we have to elect Hillary Clinton, who is a privileged white woman who was the first lady of the United States, who has never had to struggle for anything. And that's going to do better for us. That's a very hard sell to even the most politically immature people. And that is the fact of the matter, is that the sentiment surrounding post-Obama is that, hey, we have to vote for her or else Trump's going to win. That's enough for some people, but for most people, if you're actually going to try to motivate them, you have to try to make them think that they have a reason to be engaged in this political process, and they have actually a dog in the fight. There was no dog in this fight for African Americans. There was no candidates who were speaking directly to the issues facing us. There was no one who was offering actually meaningful results or meaningful resolvement of these issues of police brutality. No one was talking about how they're going to actually specifically work for our community. It was always being convoluted with other communities, that we were just people of color. We were not people who were distinguished for having issues to be resolved on our own. So when you look at that, that's the reason why Hillary Clinton did not get the black vote. And that's the reason why, although we have been very politically immature as far as our allegiance to the Democratic Party, she was not able to get the vote in this instance. Now, why do I think that this article is coming out, this news is coming out, at this time? Well, I think number one, it does have a lot to do with the fact that we're about to start gearing up for another election season. And I think that they're trying to offer explanation for why black people didn't come out for Hillary Clinton, and honestly give some type of some ease of mind to the Democrats who, have realized that, well, I don't think they've realized it, but should have realized that we're not going to necessarily vote for them just because they tell us to. And I think that the fact is that they want to continue this trend, or continue this, what they've always done, which is talk about issues abstractly, not actually offer any meaningful solutions to our problems, but still get our vote whenever it comes up for an election. But after that election, you won't matter. After that election, no one will talk about your issues. You've seen Obama in his first election talks all about black issues, but whenever it actually came for him to actually be in the office, he did nothing for black people. So that is what they want to be, the status quo. They do not want to have the black community holding them accountable. The reason is because when the black community in America holds America accountable, that's actually going to be way more drastic than other communities. Other communities have managed to integrate into the American scheme. For example, we know the Jewish community is integrated. We know the LGBT community is integrated into the American scheme. We know that the Latino community more and more is integrated into the American scheme. And when I mean the American scheme, I mean the capitalist machine. But African Americans have not been integrated into the machine, because once we're integrated, that will essentially offset the machine. We have the least, we're owed the most. And if we're actually gotten what we deserve, that will completely undo the American economy. So there's actually a sentiment to continue the laissez-faire approach to actually addressing black issues. There's actually a motivating factor. And the second that black issues actually become paramount to these people, they actually start reversing their course as to how they address them, that's going to come at the detriment of the capitalist machine in America, the American machine. So the best thing for them to do is to come up with explanations and not just convince themselves, but convince us that we didn't vote because of Russia, not because of actual sentiment growing in our communities. So I don't know if the story is true. I also want to say that I know that propaganda, again, gets put out. A lot of people, for example, are focusing on Russia's role in the election, are not actually talking about the actual reasons that she lost the election. But whether or not they were specifically targeting us, I don't know, but I don't really care, to be completely honest, because regardless, if you knew what was going on in America at that time, there was no way that we were going to basically go into this blind again. We were, even the most unconscious of us, we wanted to see more to actually get us to be motivated enough to go to the voting polls. So, the other thing I think we have to keep in mind is that I think this is my more bigger conspiracy, is that a lot of this information has come out to kind of discouraged dialogue about Black Lives Matter, meaning discouraged the dialogue or any movements against police brutality. By now, you must have observed Black Lives Matter as a movement is dead. As a movement, it has shown itself to be futile, because if you're motivating yourself by being reactionary, meaning you're waiting for something bad to happen to react to it, that's not a sustainable movement. And it didn't take too long, but eventually you burn out. The community burns out, because if we're constantly reacting and constantly going out there and protesting and constantly not getting anything for it, and we're just waiting for something else to react to, that burns you out. It burns you out psychologically, because in your mind, you have to become conditioned to honestly see that no matter what I do, this is going to be the result. The police are going to more than likely get off. God, please let them get charges, if anything. So it was a very, it was not a sustainable way, as far as if you're actually trying to have a movement that actually lasts to the point where you actually get to see the change. But Black Lives Matters right now has been basically, I would say has basically died, honestly, as far as a movement. Of course, there's organizations that still exist in their name. But I do think that moving forward, that politicians want to feel the liberty to not have to talk about anything about police brutality, especially the Democrats. And if you look at who they're trying to pose to be the next president of the United States, one who I recognize very much as being someone who they're grooming for that position is Cory Booker. They want to appeal not just to liberals, not just to blacks, not just to gays, but they actually want to appeal to some of those Trump voters. And you're going to have a very difficult time appealing to the Trump voters if you're talking about issues that are talking about police brutality, because a lot of them don't feel anything wrong with police brutality, because it doesn't affect them. And not only that, there's the Blue Lives Matter movement that says that police are beyond reproach. So I do think that this story is trying to feed into an atmosphere that discourages Black people from having movements about police brutality and actually expecting our politicians to address these movements. Because now they can say going forward, well, how do we know that these movements are actually organically from the Black community? This could be Russia again. They could put out a report saying it is Russia again. I honestly think that it gives them leverage to move on from the issue of police brutality. And that's what I think the agenda is. Now, before I get done with this subject, I want to just address the NAACP real quick. I can't stand mostly what the NAACP does. And, I just think that they operate so much as trying to paint Black people one way, trying to basically show us to be favorable to Democrats all the time, and specifically trying to show us as being favorable to the Clintons in the 2016 election. The fact that they're boycotting Facebook, not because of what Facebook did previously when it took down thousands of accounts, not the fact that Facebook has been practicing mass censorship about any revolutionary group who is of African descent, who is talking about liberation. They're trying to boycott Facebook just because Facebook has the platform that supposedly, allegedly, Russians use to create Facebook groups. That's so stupid. You're boycotting them because they were the platform that was used. And yet, when this platform has actually done things that were certainly boycottable, when they have taken down videos, trying to spread revolutionary messages, you didn't care about that. You didn't mind accepting their donation whenever they were doing those things. But now that they're actually now that they're actually doing something that you feel like comes in the way of you looking like you love Hillary Clinton and Black people looking like they love Hillary Clinton, now you feel like you have to boycott them. And, this is just a sad reality, because it really shows us where we are with the NAACP. This was the same organization that used to have something of importance. I don't think they were ever the most revolutionary group. If you don't know, they actually, although they love Dr. King now, when Dr. King was living, they completely turned their back on Dr. King because they seen him as too radical. So they're not to me, they weren't always on the right side when it comes to Black liberation, but they've done a lot. You know, they've done a lot pushing for voting, specifically with the issue of lynching. They did a lot to fight against lynching. They do come out at some times, and you know, I do also understand that the organization is not just the national organization. You also have local branches, and local branches might act very different than the national branch and actually be more active. For example, I know in my hometown, there's a local branch at NAACP that is a lot more active in the community. So it's not a condemnation of every single branch of the NAACP. But my thing is this, to go from being the organization that was about protesting lynching and going into these spots and going into the South and actually trying to bring attention to lynching, the party that was so passionate about the right to vote that you were willing to get beat up in these picket lines and all these things. To go from that to we're going to boycott Facebook for a week, it means that you've gone from something of meaning to something meaningless. These boycotts are just, you know, if you're not going to boycott, first of all, you don't boycott something for a week. If they said we're going to boycott segregated hotels for a week, the hotel managers would just look at them and laugh. If you said I'm going to boycott segregated schools for a week, that's fine. We have a week to waste. What's the point? And that's the thing we have to ask when it comes to these boycotts. I mean, I'm honestly against, I would say 95% of the boycotts that I hear Black people call for. Because number one, I'm not convinced that we're for boycotting like indefinitely. I think we're for boycotting until it leaves our psyche, until it's no longer convenient to boycott. And that's really where the difference is, because the Montgomery boycott, for example, that wasn't something that was just done for convenience. In fact, it was actually very inconvenient. You had old ladies who were walking to go to work. You know, people who actually were elderly and crippled who weren't taking a bus. That was inconvenient. So if you're going to boycott Facebook, why don't you boycott Facebook if you really want to go there? If you want to go there, boycott Facebook until it actually makes a policy change. Boycott Facebook till you actually get the changes you want to see in Facebook. But it's just such a mock to me to the idea of activism, the idea of liberation, that we would have people boycott Facebook for a week. And if anything, boycott Facebook for a week because Russia supposedly used Facebook to target African Americans, not because of the things Facebook actually did, but for something that an outside entity supposedly did on their platform. There's plenty of reasons to boycott Facebook. There's plenty that I actually would agree with. This was the weakest reason, and this shows you that they're not concerned about the things that are actually hurting us. They're concerned with their perception of us. And the idea that we look like we're not loyal to the Clintons, that concerns them enough for them to actually call for a boycott. That's very concerning for me to hear about from the NAACP. So I really hope that they do better. And I really hope that they adjust to the fact that we have a lot more serious things going on, and that for you to just be boycotting for something so simple, so simple that doesn't matter to our actual liberation. So that's all I have on this subject. If you're interested in joining the FAL, please look at the information in the description. I will see you all in another video.